Don't drink that medicine. The whisper was so soft it was almost a ghost in the vast silence of the penthouse office. It slipped past the hum of the city lights 80 floors below, past the quiet confidence of the man sitting opposite her, and found its way directly into Lillian Bradford's ear. She froze, her hand hovering inches from the cool, condensation-beaded glass on her mahogany desk. Inside the glass was a clear, custom-blended nutrient supplement, the final piece of her punishing daily routine. It was the fuel that allowed her to be the CEO of Bradford Biosciences, the woman who never slept, never faltered, never lost. Before she could turn, the whisper came again, more urgent this time, laced with a child's trembling fear. "In the dark, someone switched your medicine." I heard him say, "This will be your last medicine, Lillian." Lillian's gaze flickered, not to the child, but to the man sitting across from her. Franklin Caldwell, her chief science officer, her mentor, the man who had known her since she was a girl, smiled benevolently. He held a tablet, displaying the final merger projections, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding. The child, a little girl who couldn't be more than 10, pressed closer, her eyes, wide and terrified, darted toward Franklin. "He looked like him," she breathed, the words barely audible. The office door burst open. "Maya!" "Oh, heavens, I am so sorry, Ms. Bradford." Ben Carter, the night janitor, rushed in, his face pale with panic. His worn uniform seemed to shrink in the cavernous, million-dollar office. He grabbed his daughter's shoulder gently. "Come on, honey." "I told you to stay put. I'm so sorry, ma'am. Sometimes she wanders." Lillian didn't move. Her world had tilted on its axis. The air crackled with an impossible tension. The janitor's frantic apologies, his daughter's cryptic, terrifying warning, and Franklin's placid smile, all swirled into a vortex of pure, cold dread. Franklin finally looked up, his expression one of mild, paternal amusement. "Everything all right, Lillian? Having a problem with the staff?" Lillian drew her hand back from the glass. Her mind, a machine trained to analyze threat, risk, and opportunity, was screaming. A child's fantasy, a prank, or something else? The specificity of the warning was a shard of ice in her gut. "This will be your last medicine, Lillian." How would a janitor's daughter know her name? "No, Franklin," Lillian said, her voice a carefully constructed sheet of glass, betraying nothing. "Everything is fine. Mr. Carter, your daughter seems a little imaginative." Ben was pulling Maya toward the door, his apologies becoming a frantic, repetitive murmur. "She doesn't mean any harm, ma'am, really." She gets confused sometimes. It won't happen again." "Wait," Lillian commanded. Ben and Maya stopped, frozen in the doorway. Lillian stood up, her movements fluid and deliberate. She was a master of the boardroom, a place where the slightest hesitation could cost billions. She picked up the glass from her desk. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her face was a mask of calm authority. She looked from the glass to Franklin, who watched her with a curious, unreadable expression. Then she looked at the little girl, Maya, whose eyes pleaded with her, a silent, desperate scream. He looked like him. "You know," Lillian said, her voice light, conversational, "I believe the nutrient balance in this batch is off. I felt sluggish all day." She turned to Franklin. "Would you mind, Franklin? Take this down to the lab. Have them run a full-spectrum analysis. Top priority. I want to know exactly what my body is getting." Franklin's smile didn't waver, but for a fraction of a second, Lillian saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise? Annoyance? It was gone before she could be sure. "Of course, Lillian," he said smoothly, rising to his feet. "Though I'm sure it's just stress from the merger. You've been pushing yourself too hard." He took the glass from her, his fingers brushing hers. His touch was warm, familiar, the touch of a man who had guided her career for 20 years. It had never felt so cold. "I'll take it down myself," he said. "I want to ensure it's handled with discretion." "Thank you, Franklin," Lillian said, her gaze locking with his. "Discretion is paramount." As he walked toward the door, she added one more thing. "And Franklin, tell the lab to seal the sample and run it under my personal access code, Protocol 7. Franklin stopped, his back to her. Protocol 7 was a designation Lillian had created years ago. It was a ghost protocol, used for hostile takeover drills. It meant the sample was to be treated as a potential bioweapon. It meant a separate sealed-off lab, a 2-person analysis team, and results sent directly to her encrypted device and nowhere else. It was a protocol Franklin himself had helped her design for corporate espionage threats. Using it now was a direct, yet deniable, accusation. He turned slowly, a thin smile playing on his lips. "A bit dramatic for a vitamin drink, isn't it?" "When it comes to my company and my health," Lillian replied, her voice dropping to a steely whisper, "I'm never dramatic." He held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. "As you wish." "I'll be back shortly." He swept past Ben and Maya, the glass held carefully in his hand, and disappeared down the hall. The office door clicked shut, leaving Lillian alone with the janitor and his strange, terrified daughter. Lillian turned to them. Ben looked as if he was about to be sick. Maya was hiding behind his legs, peeking out at her. "Mr. Carter," Lillian said, her voice no longer the CEO's, but something sharper, more urgent. "You and I need to talk, now, but not here." She walked to her desk and pressed a concealed button. A section of the polished wall slid open, revealing a private elevator. "My study." "Downstairs." Not a word to anyone, Ben swallowed hard, nodding mutely. He looked down at his daughter, his expression a mixture of fear and confusion. Lillian's eyes were fixed on the girl. A child had just walked into the heart of her empire and detonated a bomb. Now, in the deafening silence of the aftermath, Lillian had to figure out if she'd just been saved, or if she was being played in a game she didn't even know had begun. The only thing she knew for sure was that her life depended on the answer. The private study was as quiet as a tomb. Unlike the sprawling glass-walled office upstairs, this room was Lillian's sanctuary and fortress. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were filled with leather-bound first editions. The air smelled faintly of old paper and cedar, and there were no windows. It was a room designed for secrets. Ben Carter stood awkwardly in the center of an antique Persian rug, his work boots looking profoundly out of place. He held Maya's hand in a death grip, as if he expected her to be snatched away at any moment. "Miss Bradford, whatever she said, she has an overactive imagination," Ben began, his voice strained. "She reads too many mystery novels." Her mother. Well, Maya's been through a lot. Please, I'll take any punishment, just don't involve her." Lillian waved a dismissive hand, her focus entirely on the child. She knelt, a surprising gesture that brought her eye level with Maya. Her Armani suit creased, but she didn't seem to care. "Maya," she said, her voice soft, but laced with an intensity that demanded the truth. "What did you see? And what did you hear?" Maya shrank behind her father's legs. "It was dark," she whispered, her voice muffled by the fabric of his pants. "I was looking for the bathroom, but I took a wrong turn." Down the hall with the blue paintings, Lillian nodded. The west corridor. It was a service hallway, rarely used. "I saw a door was open a little," Maya continued. Your kitchen place. The light was off, but the one from the coffee machine was on. A man was there. He poured your glass, but then he took out a little bottle, a tiny one, and put drops in. Did you see his face?" Lillian asked, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. "Just his side, and his hand," Maya said. "He was wearing a ring, a gold one with a dark green stone, and he was humming." Lillian felt the air leave her lungs. Franklin wore his university ring every day. gold with a dark green emerald, a graduation gift from his father. She had complimented it 1,000 times over the years. And he said my name, Lillian pressed gently. He whispered it, Maya corrected. This will be your last medicine, Lillian. Then he laughed a little. A quiet laugh. Then he left. A soft chime echoed through the room. Lillian straightened up, her eyes immediately finding the small, slate-gray tablet on her desk. The screen glowed with a single notification. Protocol 7. Analysis complete. Access. She walked to the desk, her stride measured. But her mind was a whirlwind. This was it. The moment where a child's impossible story became either a dangerous fantasy or a terrifying reality. She pressed her thumb to the screen. A series of encrypted files unlocked. Ben watched her, his face a mask of anxiety. Miss Bradford? Lillian's eyes scanned the chemical breakdown on the screen. The report was dense with scientific jargon, but the summary at the bottom was brutally, terrifyingly clear. Compound, custom synthesized hyperkalemic agent, potassium salt derivative, non-reactive with standard reagents. Mechanism, inhibits sodium-potassium pump, inducing rapid onset cardiac arrest within 3 to 5 minutes of ingestion. Detection, untraceable in standard post-mortem toxicology. Signature mimics natural heart failure. Conclusion, deliberate, sophisticated, malicious adulteration. Dosage is lethal. Lillian stared at the final words. Dosage is lethal. She looked up from the tablet, and the carefully constructed calm on her face had vanished. In its place was something Ben had never seen on the powerful CEO, an expression of raw, chilling fury mingled with a sliver of genuine fear. He tried to murder me, she said, the words falling like chips of ice into the silent room. Your daughter was right. About every single thing. Ben's face went white. The implications of what this meant crashed down on him. His daughter wasn't just imagining things. She was a witness to an attempted murder, and the target was one of the most powerful women in the world. And the killer knew her face. Oh God, he breathed, pulling Maya closer. What have you gotten yourself into? She got herself into saving my life, Lillian corrected, her voice sharp as a razor. She walked back towards them, her mind already several steps ahead, calculating, planning. And now, I'm going to save hers. And yours. What are you talking about? Ben asked, his voice shaking. We need to go to the police. And say what? Lillian shot back, her tone dismissive. That a 10-year-old girl heard a ghost in a hallway. That the man who tried to kill me is Franklin Caldwell, the most respected biochemist in the country. A man with a spotless record and powerful friends in every corner of this city. He took the evidence with him, Ben. He'll have cleaned that glass and dumped the contents by now. It's my word, and a child's story, against his. She was right. The sheer insanity of their position was crushing. They had no proof. The lab results on her tablet were sealed under a ghost protocol. Releasing them would be admitting she was running illegal internal investigations. It would be a corporate scandal that could destroy her, and Franklin would walk away clean. He thinks I'm playing a game of corporate paranoia, Lillian said, thinking aloud. He thinks I suspect a rival of tampering with my supplements. He has no idea that I know it was him. That gives us one advantage. He doesn't know what we know. What do we do? Ben asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lillian's gaze was hard. First, as of this moment, you no longer work for me. You're a liability here. I'm going to transfer a sum of money into your account, enough to last you a lifetime. You take your daughter, you get in your car, and you disappear. Go somewhere no one would ever think to look for you. Ben stared at her, stunned. We can't just run. You have to, Lillian insisted. Maya is the only thing connecting him to this. If he even suspects she saw him, he will not hesitate to silence her. To silence you both. Before Ben could argue, the intercom on her desk buzzed, a harsh, invasive sound. Lillian's eyes shot to the speaker. Franklin's voice, smooth as silk, filled the room. "Lillian, I'm back. The lab is processing the sample, but as I suspected, the preliminary scans show nothing but vitamins. A false alarm. I'm outside your office. Let's review those merger numbers, shall we?" Lillian looked at Ben, her eyes wide with a new, immediate terror. He was back. He was right outside. He thought she was in her office, but she was down here in her secret study with the one person who could destroy him. Every second they stayed was another second closer to being discovered. She strode to the intercom, her hand hovering over the button, her mind racing. She was trapped in her own fortress, and the monster was at the gate. Lillian's finger pressed the intercom button. Her voice, when it came out, was flawlessly weary, edged with a convincing annoyance that she knew Franklin would attribute to stress. "Franklin, I'm getting a migraine." "The lights in that office are like daggers," she said, her tone clipped. "The analysis can wait until morning. Send the final merger draft to my personal email. I'm going home. Don't wait for me." There was a pause on the other end. Lillian could picture him standing there, his brow furrowed with that look of feigned concern he wore so well. "Lillian? Are you sure? You sound terrible. Perhaps I should have security drive you." "Absolutely not," she snapped, adding the perfect amount of irrational irritation. "I just want silence." "Go home, Franklin. That's an order." Another beat of silence. "Of course, Lillian. Rest well." The line clicked off. Lillian let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She turned to Ben, her eyes blazing with urgency. "He'll be gone in 5 minutes. We have to move now." "Go where?" Ben whispered, his face still ashen. "He knows who I am. He'll find my address, my car." "He won't," Lillian said, already moving toward a bookshelf. She pulled on a thick volume of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. The entire bookcase swung inward with a soft, pneumatic hiss, revealing a stark, concrete corridor lit by recessed floor lights. "He'll be looking for a janitor from Queens. He won't be looking for a guest at one of my private properties." She led them into the passage, the bookshelf ceiling shut behind them. The air was cool and smelled of dust and concrete. "This tunnel leads to a private parking garage 2 blocks from here," she explained as they hurried along the narrow walkway. "There's a car there, a nondescript SUV. It's registered to a shell corporation that doesn't exist. The keys are in the glove box, along with a burner phone and a credit card." She stopped and turned to face him, the low light carving shadows into her face. "There's a cabin in upstate New York. It's on a private lake, surrounded by 1,000 acres of woods. It's completely off the grid. Solar power, satellite internet, its own water source. My father built it as a place to escape. No one, not even Franklin, knows it exists. The address is programmed into the phone's GPS." Ben stared at her, overwhelmed. A secret passage, a getaway car, a hidden cabin. This was the stuff of the spy novels Maya loved, only it was terrifyingly real. "I can't just run away," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "He'll know you helped us. He'll come after you. He's already coming after me," Lillian said grimly. "He doesn't know I have you on my side yet." "That's my only advantage. You and Maya are my only advantage. He thinks his only loose end is a 10-year-old girl he can easily find and silence. He can't find you if you don't exist. I need you safe. I need Maya safe. She's the only one who can prove what he did." Her gaze softened as she looked at Maya, who was watching her with wide, intelligent eyes. "Your daughter is incredibly brave, and I will not let anything happen to her." The conviction in her voice was absolute. Ben, who had spent his life being overlooked and underestimated, found himself believing her. For the first time since his wife died, he felt like he wasn't completely alone in his fight to protect his daughter. "Okay," he breathed, nodding. "Okay, we'll go." They reached the end of the tunnel, a heavy steel door. Lillian entered a code on a keypad and it swung open into the dim light of an underground garage. A dark gray SUV stood waiting in a reserved spot. It was clean, anonymous, perfect. "The phone is pre-programmed with my number and my head of security's number. His name is Shaw. He's the only other person I trust. Contact me as soon as you get there. Don't stop for anything," Lillian instructed, her voice low and rapid. Ben nodded again, opening the back door for Maya, who scrambled inside without a word. He turned back to Lillian, his expression torn. "Thank you." "Stay alive, Ben," Lillian said simply. "That's all the thanks I need." He got into the car, and a moment later, the engine turned over with a quiet hum. The SUV pulled out of the space and headed up the ramp, disappearing into the city night. Lillian stood in the silence of the garage for a long moment, the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by a cold, simmering rage. Then she turned and walked back into the tunnel, her mind already on the next move. The board meeting in the morning. She would have to sit across the table from Franklin, pretend nothing had happened, and act the part of the unsuspecting CEO. She emerged back in her study, the bookshelf swinging silently shut, erasing any sign of her guests. The room was just as they'd left it. She walked to her desk, her body aching with a weariness that went beyond lack of sleep. Her personal tablet chimed again. It was a security alert. She tapped the screen, expecting a notification that Franklin's car had left the executive garage. But that's not what it said. The alert was from the lobby security desk, a time-stamped log entry. 214703, Caldwell F. Access granted. Security Central Command. Lillian stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. Franklin hadn't left the building. He told her he was going home, but he didn't. He had gone straight to the one place where he could get access to every camera feed in the entire skyscraper, including the service corridors, including the private garages. He was looking for something, or someone. A horrifying thought struck her. Did he see them? Did he know about the tunnel? She frantically typed a command, pulling up the live feed from Security Central. The image was clear. There was Franklin, standing with the night shift supervisor, smiling, pointing at a bank of monitors. He was a man with nothing to hide. Then Lillian saw it. On the monitor he was pointing to, a schematic of the building's lower levels was displayed, and his finger was resting on the section marked Sub-Level C, the private garage. He knew. He must have suspected something when she used Protocol 7. He was playing a different game. He wasn't waiting to see if she was suspicious. He was actively hunting, and she had just sent Ben and Maya straight into his line of sight. A cold bolt of adrenaline shot through Lillian. He knew, or he suspected enough to check. She had underestimated his paranoia. Her fingers flew across the tablet, her mind a blur of calculations. The SUV had a 5-minute head start. On the late-night streets of Manhattan, that was nothing. She stabbed the call button for the burner phone she had given Ben. Every ring felt like a lifetime. "Don't talk," she said the moment the line connected, her voice a low, clipped command. "Just listen. You may have a tail." Franklin didn't leave. "He's in Security Central. You need to assume he has eyes everywhere in the car, speeding towards the George Washington Bridge. Ben's knuckles were white on the steering wheel." He glanced in the rear-view mirror. The sparse, late-night traffic seemed normal. A few yellow cabs, a sleepy-looking sedan. Nothing threatening. Maya was buckled in the back, her small face illuminated by the passing streetlights. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Stay on the planned route for now. I'm watching," Lillian said. On her screen, she had already pulled up the city's traffic camera network, her CEO-level access overriding privacy protocols. She found the SUV's license plate, a randomly generated string of characters she had memorized. A green dot appeared on a map of Manhattan, moving steadily uptown. She switched her view back to the internal security feed. Franklin was still there, talking to the supervisor. He was pointing now to the employee exit logs. He was looking for Ben Carter's time card, looking for proof that he'd left at his scheduled time. When he found Ben hadn't clocked out, his suspicion would be confirmed. Lillian's mind raced. She couldn't stop Franklin from discovering the truth, but she could buy Ben time. Her fingers typed another series of commands, accessing the building's network controls. She found the server that managed the time clock system. With a few keystrokes, she located Ben's file and manually entered a checkout time for 10 minutes ago, backdating it. She then triggered a minor server reset, burying her digital tracks in a flurry of routine error logs. It was a temporary fix, a flimsy piece of misdirection, but it might be enough. On the security feed, she saw the supervisor tap his screen and nod at Franklin, showing him the newly falsified log. Franklin smiled, a polite, satisfied expression that didn't reach his eyes. He thanked the man and turned to leave, but he didn't head for the exit. He walked towards the elevator bank that led to the executive garage. "He's on the move," Lillian said into the phone. "He's heading for his car. Ben, you need to change your route. Now, the GPS is about to update. Follow it exactly." She rerouted the burner phone's navigation, sending them on a serpentine path through the Bronx, away from the major highways Franklin would expect them to take. It was a longer, slower route, but it was less predictable. "Lillian?" Franklin's voice suddenly crackled through the phone line. Lillian froze. It wasn't a call. He had patched himself into her secure channel. A chill snaked down her spine. He was onto her. "I know you're on this line," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational. The sound of his car's powerful engine hummed in the background. A clever bit of work with a time clock server. "But you've gotten sloppy in your old age. You forgot about the elevator logs." The janitor never went down to the lobby, and his car is still sitting in the employee lot. Ben heard Franklin's voice, and his blood ran cold. He was listening. He was in his car. He was hunting them. "You have something that belongs to me, Lillian," Franklin continued, his tone hardening. "A piece of failed research, a loose end. I'm merely trying to collect my property. Give the girl back, and we can forget this unfortunate business ever happened." "She's not property, Franklin," Lillian snarled into the phone. "She's a child." "She's a variable you can't control," he retorted. "And we both know how you hate those. This doesn't have to be messy. Pull over, leave the girl. You and the father can walk away." "Go to hell," Lillian said. A dry chuckle came through the speakers. "I had a feeling you'd say that." "Very well. We'll do it the hard way. The line went dead." "He's going to find us," Ben said, his voice hoarse. He glanced in the rearview mirror again, his eyes scanning every car, every pair of headlights. "No, he won't," Lillian said, though her confidence was a sham. She was out of tricks. He was a master of this game, and she had been played. She did the only thing she had left to do. She dialed the second number on the burner phone. It was answered after a single ring. "Shaw," a gruff voice said. "Shaw, it's Lillian. I'm executing contingency Omega. Full activation. I'm sending you a file and a license plate number. An employee and his daughter are in danger. They are my top priority. I need you to get them to the lake house. Franklin has gone rogue. He is hostile. Do you understand?" There was no surprise in her head of security's voice, only grim acceptance. "Understood, Ms. Bradford. Hostile. Top priority. I'm on my way." Lillian ended the call. Shaw was the best, a former Special Forces operator who was loyal to a fault. But he was downtown. Ben was already crossing into New Jersey, a lone car on a dark highway. She watched the green dot of the SUV on her map, and then she saw it. A new dot appearing from a side street, moving fast. It had no license plate information attached. It was a ghost car. It fell in behind Ben's SUV, keeping a steady distance. "Ben," Lillian said, her voice tight. "You have a tail." A black sedan, 4 car lengths back. "They're following you." Ben's eyes shot to the mirror. The sedan was there, sleek, dark, with tinted windows. It had appeared out of nowhere. His heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of his chest. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The SUV surged forward. In the back seat, Maya, who had been silent the entire time, spoke in a small, terrified voice. "Daddy," she whispered, "the man in that car, he's humming." The hum was a vibration Ben could feel in his own teeth. It was a low, predatory sound that seemed to crawl through the car's frame. It was the sound of a predator enjoying the hunt. "Lillian, he's right behind us," Ben said, his voice strained. "What do I do?" "Just drive, Ben. Shaw's mobile. He's closing on your position." Lillian's voice came back, impossibly calm through the speaker. "But he's 15 minutes out. You need to lose them before then." "Lose them? They're in a performance sedan. I'm in an SUV." "Listen to me," Lillian commanded, her voice cutting through his panic. "In 1 mile, you'll see an exit for the Palisades Parkway. Don't take it. It's a trap. It's too isolated. Keep going. Another half-mile past that, there's a service exit for a commercial trucking depot. It will look like a dead end. It's not." Take it on her screen. Lillian was a digital ghost, manipulating a world Ben couldn't see. She had hacked the depot's gate controls. As Ben's SUV approached, the gate would swing open. For the car behind him, it would remain shut. Ben's knuckles ached from his grip on the wheel. He floored the accelerator, the SUV's engine roaring in protest. The black sedan matched his speed effortlessly, staying glued to his bumper. Its headlights were blinding in his rear-view mirror. "They're getting closer," he grunted. The car swerved into the lane beside him. For a moment, they were side by side, two dark shapes hurtling through the night. Ben risked a glance. He couldn't see the driver through the tinted glass, but he felt his gaze. In the back, Maya had curled into a small ball, her eyes squeezed shut. "Daddy, the sleeping road," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. The service exit was coming up fast, a dark, unlit slash in the side of the highway. It looked exactly like what Lillian had said, a dead end. "Now, Ben!" "Hard right!" Ben wrenched the wheel. The SUV squealed in protest, tires fighting for grip as he veered off the highway and onto the narrow access road. He braced for the impact of a security gate, but as Lillian promised, a heavy iron gate was already swinging open, welcoming them into the darkness of the depot. He shot through the gap. In his mirror, he saw the black sedan try to follow, but the gate was already closing. It slammed shut with a clang of finality, leaving the sedan stranded on the shoulder. For a moment, there was only the sound of Ben's ragged breathing. He had done it. They were safe. "I did it," he breathed into the phone. "We lost them." "No, you didn't," a new voice said on the line. It was the gruff, steady voice of Shaw. "You have another one. Came out of the Parkway entrance. He was waiting for you. He's entering the depot through the main gate. You're in a box." Ben's heart plummeted. He looked ahead. The depot was a maze of parked semi-trailers, their massive forms like sleeping giants in the gloom. It was a labyrinth with only one way in and one way out. They hadn't escaped. They'd been herded into a trap. "Where do I go?" Ben asked, his voice cracking. "Keep moving to the back of the lot," Shaw instructed. "There's a chain-link fence bordering a railway line. Get to that fence. I'm 2 minutes out." Ben navigated the SUV through the rows of trucks, his headlights cutting a nervous path through the shadows. He saw the flicker of other headlights behind them, moving fast, closing the distance. "The fence is a dead end, Shaw," he yelled into the phone. "Every box has a back door," Shaw's voice replied calmly. "Get ready to hit it hard." Ben saw the fence now, a tall, imposing barrier of steel and wire. Beyond it lay a gravel embankment and a set of dark, silent railway tracks. It was a wall. There was nowhere to go. The black sedan was closing fast. He could see it clearly now, weaving through the parked trucks with a deadly grace. "Now what?" Ben cried. "Daddy, stop," Maya said, her voice clear and strangely calm. She was unbuckled, kneeling on the back seat, staring out the rear window. "Maya, sit down." "Stop," she insisted. She pointed. "There." The truck with the red door. Ben saw it. A long-haul trailer with a faded logo and a single red-painted rear door. It was no different from the dozens of others surrounding them. "What about it?" he asked desperately. The sedan was almost on them. "The humming is coming from inside it," Maya whispered. Before Ben could process what that meant, the red door of the trailer flew open. A figure stood silhouetted against a dim interior light, holding something long and dark in his hands. It wasn't a trap. It was an ambush. "Go!" Lillian screamed through the phone. "Ben, drive! Ram the fence, now!" Ben slammed his foot on the accelerator. The SUV lurched forward, engine screaming, straight towards the chain-link fence. The man in the trailer raised the object he was holding. A rifle. A flash of light. The rear window of the SUV exploded, showering the back seat in a hailstorm of tempered glass. Maya screamed. Ben didn't hesitate. He held the accelerator to the floor, his eyes fixed on the fence. He closed his eyes an instant before impact. The sound was a deafening shriek of tortured metal. The SUV's front end crumpled, but its momentum carried it through. The fence ripped apart like paper. The vehicle bucked and bounced, tumbling down the gravel embankment before landing with a bone-jarring crash on the railway ties. Its frame twisted, its engine dead. Silence. Ben coughed, the taste of dust and copper in his mouth. He turned, his body screaming in pain. "Maya! Are you okay?" She was huddled on the floor, covered in glass but seemingly unharmed. "I'm okay, Daddy." Headlights flooded the ruined SUV. The black sedan had stopped at the top of the embankment. A door opened. A man got out, tall and broad-shouldered. He started walking down the gravel slope towards them, his movements unhurried, inevitable. Ben fumbled with his seatbelt, his hands shaking. The door was jammed. They were trapped. The man reached the bottom of the embankment. He was 10 feet away. Ben could see his face now, cold and impassive. Suddenly, a second set of headlights sliced through the darkness from further down the tracks. A heavy-duty pickup truck with a reinforced grille was barreling towards them, moving impossibly fast along the railway line itself. The truck didn't slow down. It slammed into the man from the sedan, sending him flying into the darkness. It screeched to a halt beside the wrecked SUV, its driver's side door flying open. "Get in!" A man with a scarred face and cold gray eyes yelled. It was Shaw. "Now, we've got 3 more minutes before the midnight freight train comes through this line." The world was a chaotic blur of screeching metal and shouting. Shaw reached into the wrecked SUV, his hands strong and sure as he unbuckled Ben's jammed seatbelt. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his eyes scanning for injuries. "No, just bruised," Ben coughed, his ribs screaming in protest as Shaw practically hauled him from the driver's seat. "Get Maya," Ben gasped. Shaw was already moving, pulling open the twisted rear door. He gently scooped up the trembling 10-year-old, wrapping her in his tactical jacket. "I have her," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "We have less than 2 minutes." Ben scrambled after them, his legs unsteady, as Shaw deposited Maya safely in the cab of his pickup. Far down the tracks, a mournful horn blast echoed through the night, followed by the low, rumbling vibration of an approaching train. The headlight was a distant star, but it was growing brighter with terrifying speed. "Go!" Ben yelled, climbing into the passenger seat. Shaw was already behind the wheel, throwing the truck into gear. The pickup tore down the railway line, its heavy-duty suspension handling the uneven ties with a bone-jarring rhythm. He veered up a service ramp and back onto a deserted industrial road, just as the freight train roared past the spot where the SUV had been, its horn blaring like a furious beast. In the relative quiet of the truck's cab, the aftermath of the ambush settled over them. Ben turned and looked at his daughter. She was huddled in the back, wrapped in Shaw's jacket, her face pale and streaked with tears. "He tried to shoot us, Daddy," she whispered. Ben's rage was a hot, bitter wave that momentarily eclipsed his fear. "I know, sweetie." "I know Shaw," his eyes fixed on the road. reached for a radio handset on his dashboard. "Olympus, this is Guardian. Do you copy?" Lillian's voice, tinny but clear, came through the speaker. "I copy, Guardian. What's your status?" "I lost your visuals. Package is secure. Vehicle is a total loss," Shaw reported, his tone all business. "We were ambushed. At least 2 hostiles, armed with long rifles. They were waiting for us at the depot. This wasn't a tail, Olympus. This was a kill box." A heavy silence followed from the other end. Lillian had sent them away to keep them safe, and instead, she had sent them into an execution. "Are they okay?" she finally asked, her voice tight with a strain she couldn't hide. "Shaken. Minor injuries." "Nothing critical," Shaw said. "The original destination is compromised." They knew the route. "We need a new plan." "The lake house is out," Lillian agreed. "Running is no longer an option. He won't stop until he has her." Her voice hardened. "So we stop him first." "Bring them to me." "Here?" Shaw's voice held a rare note of surprise. "The building is his territory. He thinks I'm a scared CEO hiding in my tower. He expects me to be on the defensive. He won't expect me to bring the evidence right back under his nose," Lillian reasoned. "Bring them in through the tunnel entrance. I'll meet you there, understood," Shaw said, and the line went silent. He glanced at Ben. "She's not like other bosses." "I'm starting to realize that," Ben said quietly. He looked at Maya, who had finally fallen into an exhausted, fitful sleep in the back. The terror of the last hour was one thing, but the question that truly haunted him was why. Why was a man like Franklin Caldwell so obsessed with his daughter? What made her so important that he would orchestrate a murderous ambush on a public highway? Back in her study, Lillian stood over her desk, her hands braced on the cool mahogany. Shaw's words echoed in her ears. Kill box. This was no longer a corporate chess match. Franklin wasn't trying to oust her or blackmail her. He was trying to erase a mistake, and that mistake was inextricably linked to Maya Carter. She needed leverage. She needed a weapon, and the only one she could think of was the truth. She sat down at her terminal, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. She bypassed the main corporate servers and sliced directly into the deep archives, the digital catacombs where the company's oldest and most sensitive data was stored. She typed in the only lead she had, Project Nightingale. A series of red security warnings flashed across the screen. Classified, Level 10. Clearance required. Biohazard protocols engaged. Access requires genetic handshake and executive two-factor authentication. Franklin's clearance was Level 9. As CEO, hers was Level 10. But the second layer of security, the genetic handshake, was something new. She placed her palm on the biometric scanner. The system recognized her, but a new prompt appeared. Secondary authentication required, Franklin Caldwell. Lillian's blood ran cold. He had locked her out of her own company's darkest secret. He had anticipated this. He had built a digital fortress around the truth, and he held one of the two keys. A surge of helpless fury washed over her. He had outmaneuvered her at every turn, but her father had taught her that every fortress has a flaw. Franklin had locked the front door, but what about the back? The project was initiated 15 years ago. The security protocols back then were less sophisticated. She couldn't access the core project files, but what about the peripheral data? Budgets, personnel files, internal memos. She began a new search, digging into the unclassified employee records from that era. She searched for Ben's late wife, Sarah Carter. Her file was sparse. A mid-level lab technician hired 16 years ago. Good performance reviews. Then, a series of medical leave requests. And finally, a termination notice dated 15 years ago. The reason for termination was listed as deceased. Lillian felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She cross-referenced the date with company incident reports. A few minutes later, she found it. A single-page document, dry and bureaucratic. An official report on a minor chemical spill in Lab C4. The report stated there was one fatality. A lab technician who had ignored safety protocols entered a contaminated zone and suffered a fatal seizure. The technician's name was Sarah Carter. The report was signed at the bottom by the head of biogenetic research at the time, the man who had personally overseen the investigation and ruled it a tragic but preventable workplace accident, Franklin Caldwell. Lillian stared at the signature, a neat, confident scrawl she had seen on thousands of documents. Ben had told her his wife had died from complications after childbirth, a story that Franklin himself had likely fed him. But the company records told a different story, a story of a fatal accident. Two stories, both lies. The truth, Lillian suspected, was buried deep inside the locked files of Project Nightingale. And Franklin had not only killed Sarah Carter, he had written the official story that covered his tracks. He wasn't just a would-be murderer. He was a successful one. The reunion in the secret study was heavy with the metallic tang of fear and the grim reality of their new situation. Shaw led Ben and Maya inside, the massive bookshelf hissing shut, sealing them in. Maya, exhausted but safe, immediately curled up on a leather sofa, pulling Shaw's oversized jacket around her like a shield. Ben, however, was pacing, his body a coiled spring of nervous energy and fury. "He had a man with a rifle." "A rifle? What kind of monster?" He trailed off, unable to articulate the sheer evil of it. "The kind who has been hiding a secret for 15 years, Lillian said, her voice low and heavy. She was standing by her desk, the file on Sarah Carter still glowing on her tablet screen. "What are you talking about?" Ben asked, stopping his pacing. Lillian looked at him, her expression a mixture of pity and grim resolve. There was no easy way to say it. "Ben, I found the official report on your wife's death." He stared at her, confused. "What about it?" "The doctors said it was an amniotic embolism. Rare. But it happens." "That's the story you were told," Lillian said softly. "It's not the story the company recorded." She turned the tablet so he could see. He walked over slowly, his eyes scanning the cold bureaucratic text. He read it once, then again, his face draining of all color. "Chemical spill. Workplace accident. Fatal seizure," he whispered, the words sounding alien on his tongue. He looked from the screen to Lillian, his eyes pleading for it to be a mistake. No, that's not right. Sarah wasn't even at work that week. She was on maternity leave. Maya had just been born. The report is dated 2 days after Maya's birthday," Lillian confirmed, her voice barely audible. "It's signed by Franklin." The truth hit Ben with the force of a physical blow. The story he had built his life around for the last 10 years, the tragic, random loss of his wife, was a lie. A carefully constructed lie to cover up a murder. The grief he had carried was real, but its foundation was a fiction. The pain was suddenly replaced by a white-hot, volcanic rage. "He killed her," Ben said, his voice a raw, broken thing. "All this time, he killed her and let me believe." He sank into a chair, his head in his hands, his body shaking with a decade's worth of suppressed pain and newfound hatred. Shaw stood silently by the door, a stoic guardian, giving the man space for his world to shatter. After a long moment, Ben looked up. The grief was still there, but now it was forged into something hard and sharp. "What is Project Nightingale?" "I don't know," Lillian admitted. "The files are locked. Franklin designed a security protocol that requires both of our authorizations to access, a digital dead man's switch. He knew if anything ever happened to him, his secrets would be exposed, so he made sure he was essential to keeping them hidden." "Then we make him open it," Ben said, his voice devoid of fear. There was nothing left to be afraid of. Franklin had already taken everything from him once. "We can't force him," Shaw interjected, speaking for the first time. "A man like that will have contingencies, fail-safes that would wipe the servers clean if he's under duress. Then we trick him," Lillian said, her strategic mind kicking into gear. "We create a crisis that he can't ignore. We force him to believe his entire life's work is about to be exposed. We make him so paranoid that he feels the need to go and check on his data, to secure his secrets. And when he does, we'll be waiting." She began to pace, the energy in the room shifting from grief to conspiracy. "He thinks I'm rattled. He thinks I'm trying to protect the Carters. He doesn't know that I know about Sarah. That's our new advantage." She stopped, her eyes locking with Shaw's. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for 8 a.m. tomorrow." Shaw raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds of the failed merger, officially," Lillian said. "But I'm going to let a rumor slip to a board member I know will run straight to Franklin. A rumor that our internal security team has uncovered a massive multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, siphoning funds into an unauthorized shadow project. I'm going to say I'm bringing in federal investigators. Ben saw the shape of her plan. You're going to make him panic." "Exactly," Lillian confirmed. "He'll be trapped in that boardroom for hours, stewing, wondering how much I know. He'll be desperate to get to his secret lab or his personal terminal to either destroy the evidence or transfer it. He'll have to use his credentials to do it. And you," she said, looking at Shaw, "will be monitoring every keystroke he makes, every door he opens, every network he accesses." "It's a good plan," Shaw said with a nod. "Risky, but good." "It's the only one we have," Lillian said. She looked at Ben, her expression serious. "But it means you and Maya have to stay here. In this room. It's the only place in the building I know is secure." "We're not going anywhere," Ben said, his eyes hard as flint. He looked over at his daughter, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storm raging around her. He wasn't just protecting her from a monster anymore. He was going to get justice for her mother. Lillian walked to her console, her resolve set. It was time to light the fire. She drafted the email, her words sharp and official, calling the emergency meeting that would serve as the stage for her trap. With a final, decisive tap, she sent it. The notification would be hitting the board members' phones right now. Franklin would have just received it. She had thrown her stone. Now she had to wait for the ripples. She didn't have to wait long. Less than a minute later, the private, encrypted line on her desk buzzed. There was only one person who had that number. She took a deep breath and answered, putting the call on speaker. Franklin Caldwell's voice filled the room. It was no longer the smooth, paternal tone of a trusted mentor. It was flat, cold, and stripped of all pretense. It was the voice of a killer. "Lillian, what do you think you're doing?" Lillian met Ben's and Shaw's gazes, a silent signal to stay quiet. She leaned back in her chair, adopting an air of calculated, weary arrogance. "I'm running my company, Franklin," she replied, her voice a cool counterpoint to his barely veiled threat. "What circumstances would those be?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "The multi-million-dollar hole I just found in our R&D budget," Lillian said, letting a hint of manufactured outrage seep into her tone. "Funds being funneled into a ghost account for the past 15 years. An unauthorized project, it seems. One that you were overseeing. Does the name Nightingale ring a bell?" She was bluffing, weaving the pieces she knew into a narrative of financial crime. It was the only bait she had. A dead silence on the line confirmed she'd hit a nerve. When Franklin spoke again, the fake congeniality was gone, replaced by a chilling authority. "You are playing with things you do not understand. Cancel the meeting." "Not a chance," Lillian said, her voice dripping with dismissive confidence. "I'm putting the entire R&D department under audit, and I'm bringing in the feds to find out where my money went. We'll see you at 8 a.m. She cut the connection, leaving his response hanging in the void. The silence in the study was profound. "He knows," Ben whispered. "He has to know you're lying. He knows I'm coming for him," Lillian corrected. "But he doesn't know why. He thinks I've found a financial crime. He'll be focused on covering his monetary tracks, not his homicidal ones. That's the misdirection we need." While she had been on the phone, Shaw had been working silently, interfacing his own hardened laptop with Lillian's system. "I'm in," Shaw said quietly. I've piggybacked onto the building's internal surveillance network. I've flagged Franklin's biometric signature. Any door he opens, any elevator he calls, any terminal he logs into, I'll get an instant alert. When he makes his move, we'll see it." Lillian nodded. The trap was set. Now came the hardest part. Waiting for the dawn. The hours that followed were the longest of Lillian's life. Sleep was an impossibility. She gave Ben and Maya her private bedroom adjoining the study. Shaw remained a silent, watchful statue at the console. Lillian found herself standing before a framed photograph on her shelf. It was from 10 years ago. A younger Lillian beside a smiling Franklin. They looked like father and daughter. She felt a pang of a loss so profound it was dizzying. The man in that picture had never really existed. He was a mask. He was your friend. Lillian turned. Ben was standing in the doorway. Maya was asleep behind him. "He was the closest thing I had to a father after my own died," she admitted, her voice quiet. "He taught me everything about this business. It seems he left out a few key lessons." "Why?" Ben asked, his voice thick with his own pain. "Why kill Sarah, and then try to kill you? Power. Legacy," Lillian said, the words tasting like ash. "Project Nightingale must have been his life's work. Sarah must have discovered something. To him, we're not people. We're just obstacles." A soft noise made them both turn. Maya was awake. She slipped off the sofa and walked over to the photograph. "His smell is in that picture," she said, her voice sleepy but clear. She wrinkled her nose. "Mommy didn't like his smell. It smelled like cold rocks and lies." Her small hand reached out and touched Lillian's. "Your smell is different now. It used to be all sharp, like his. Now it smells like Daddy's jacket. Sad, but safe." Tears pricked at Lillian's eyes. A 10-year-old girl had just summed up the entire hollow trajectory of her life and the seismic shift of the last 12 hours. The first rays of dawn began to creep into the city's sky. It was time. An hour later, Lillian Bradford strode through the executive wing of her company. She was dressed in a charcoal gray suit, tailored like armor. Her face was a mask of cold fury and absolute control. The entire floor was buzzing with a nervous energy. Shaw's voice came through the tiny, invisible earpiece she wore. "He's in the boardroom. Hasn't accessed anything unusual yet. He's waiting for you." She reached the massive double doors of the boardroom and pushed them open. The room was a cathedral of glass and steel. The board members sat around the long, polished table, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. And at the far end of the table, sitting in the chair to her right, was Franklin Caldwell. He was impeccably dressed, his expression calm, but his eyes were like chips of ice. She walked to her seat at the head of the table. A hush fell over the room. She sat down and looked directly at him. The room was filled with titans of industry, but as their gazes locked, they were the only two people in the world. The hunter and the hunted. And Lillian was no longer sure which was which. "Good morning, everyone," Lillian began, her voice crisp and carrying across the silent room. "I apologize for the short notice. As of last night, I have uncovered what I can only describe as a catastrophic breach of fiscal and ethical protocol within this company." A wave of murmurs rippled through the board members. They exchanged uneasy glances. Lillian's eyes were fixed on Franklin. "For the past 15 years, it appears a significant portion of our research and development budget has been systematically diverted into an unauthorized project. A project with no oversight, no board approval, and no official record. A project codenamed Nightingale." She let the name hang in the air. Franklin's face remained a placid mask, but she saw the slight tightening around his eyes. "The scale of this deception is staggering," Lillian continued, her voice cold as ice. "Therefore, effective immediately, I am freezing all R&D spending and have formally requested the SEC and the FBI to open a joint investigation." The boardroom erupted in muted chaos. Franklin's voice rose above the din, calm and authoritative. "Lillian, with all due respect, this is a reckless and unsubstantiated accusation. You've been under immense pressure with this merger. I think you're seeing ghosts where there are merely accounting errors." "Are you calling me incompetent, Franklin?" Lillian shot back, her voice sharp. "I am suggesting you are overwrought," he countered smoothly, turning his charismatic gaze to the rest of the board. "She is proposing we invite federal wolves into our henhouse based on a paranoid fantasy. This will destroy our stock value and kill the merger. It is an act of corporate suicide." He was good. He was painting her as an unstable leader, using her reputation for being relentless against her. "He's lying, but they're listening to him," Shaw's voice whispered in her ear. "His biometrics are elevated, but he's holding steady." "He believes he can control this." Lillian stood up, projecting an aura of absolute power. "This is not a debate. This is a fact. A crime has been committed against this company, and I will not rest until the person responsible is held accountable." She looked down the table, meeting the eyes of each board member. "Anyone who stands in the way of this investigation will be considered an accessory." The threat was clear. She was drawing a line in the sand. Franklin knew he was losing control. He pushed his chair back and stood, a pained expression on his face. "Lillian, I can see you're not well. I cannot in good conscience be a party to this. I must tender my resignation." It was a power play, daring them to choose. "It's a bluff," Shaw's voice came. "He's not resigning. He's creating a reason to leave the room. He's going to make his move. Your resignation is not accepted," Lillian said coldly. "You will remain here until the preliminary investigators arrive." Franklin's composure finally cracked. "You can't keep me here." Then, his tablet on the table chimed. He glanced down at it. "He just received an encrypted message," Shaw reported in her ear. His heart rate just spiked. "He's panicking." Franklin's head snapped up, his face ashen. He looked at Lillian, a new, wild terror in his eyes. He stumbled back a step, clutching his chest. My heart," he gasped, his voice a convincing croak. "My medication. I need—" Before anyone could react, he turned and staggered out of the boardroom, a perfect portrayal of a man in medical distress. "Stay here," Lillian commanded the stunned board. The moment she was out of their sight, she broke into a dead run. "He's in the elevator." Shaw's voice was a rapid-fire report. "Not going to the medical bay? He's heading for the sublevels. Lab C, I'm on my way," Lillian said, racing for the private elevator in her office. "Where are Ben and Maya?" "With me. We're one floor below you." Moving to intercept the private elevator opened onto the deserted, dimly lit corridor of the sub-level. Shaw was there, waiting for her. Behind him stood Ben, his face a mask of grim determination. Beside him, Maya held her father's hand. "He got a message," Shaw said quickly. "Keywords: asset compromised. Carter." They ran down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the silence. They reached the heavy steel door to the C-wing. It stood slightly ajar. "Lillian, the network activity from his terminal is insane," Shaw warned. "He's initiated a full data purge, and he's activated the lab's sanitation protocol. It's a complete system flush. Chemicals, then incineration. In 5 minutes, everything in there will be sterilized by fire." They burst through the door into a large, dark observation room. Through a massive pane of reinforced glass, they could see the main laboratory. It was a ghostly space, filled with dormant equipment. And there, in the center of the lab, was Franklin. He stood before a single active console, his back to them, his fingers flying across the keyboard. On the large screen above him, progress bars were rapidly filling. Project Nightingale, deleting archives, 98%. Lab sanitation protocol engaged, T-432. They were too late. The data was almost gone. Franklin finished his typing and hit a final key. The progress bar hit 100%. The screen flashed with 2 triumphant final words: Purge complete. He turned around, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. When he saw them standing there, he actually smiled. A real chilling smile of victory. "It's over, Lillian," he said, his voice echoing through the intercom. "You have nothing." Lillian's face was pale. He was right. It was over. The proof was gone. But then, a small voice cut through the despair. "No," Maya said, her voice clear and strong. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the lab beyond the glass. She pointed, not at the blank main screen, but at a solid steel wall in the far corner of the room. "It's not gone. It's in there. I can smell the electricity. And I can hear it. I can hear my mommy singing." Franklin's victorious smile vanished, replaced by a look of baffled fury. He stared at the little girl on the other side of the glass. "What did she say?" "You heard her." Lillian's voice was low, filled with a dawning, ferocious hope. "It's a trick," Franklin snarled, his eyes darting to the sanitation protocol timer on the screen. T-358. "A child's fantasy." "The data is gone." "Not everything," Ben said. He looked at his daughter. "Maya, what do you hear?" "It's a song," she insisted, walking to the observation window, her small hand on the cool glass. "Like the one Mommy used to sing to me." "It's coming from inside the wall." Shaw's eyes narrowed, scanning the featureless steel wall Maya indicated. "It's a solid-state server housing, shielded. It wouldn't be on the main network. A physical backup." The timer clicked down. T-330. "It doesn't matter," Franklin yelled, lunging for a control panel to trigger the incineration immediately. "You'll never get to it in time." "Shaw now," Lillian commanded. Shaw fired 2 precise shots at the reinforced lock on the laboratory door. The lock sparked and exploded. He slammed his shoulder against the heavy door, forcing it open. Franklin spun and charged, but Shaw moved with brutal efficiency, sidestepping the attack and slamming him face first into the observation window. Franklin crumpled to the ground, dazed. Ben, Lillian, and Maya rushed into the lab. The air was thick with the smell of ozone. A series of nozzles in the ceiling hissed. T-245. "Here," Maya said, running to the steel wall and placing her ear against it. Ben ran his hands over the smooth, seamless surface. There was nothing. "How do we open it?" "A song, a key," Lillian urged. "Ben, what was the song Sarah used to sing?" He closed his eyes, digging back through a decade of grief. "A lullaby. She wrote it for Maya. She called it My Nightingale." Project Nightingale. It wasn't just a code name. Lillian ran to the dead console. There was a small audio input port.